So you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense Logical Reason. And as always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So, Representative Hakeem Jefferies, a Democrat out of New York, he was on C-SPAN and he commented on a statement that Representative Byron Donalds, who's a Republican of Florida, supposedly said. Now, Robert supposedly said that black people were better under Jim Crow. So let's go into that video.
Speaker, has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow.
So basically, he went into this without consequences rant about things that happened during segregation, as if to say that blacks, we were worse off, during Jim Crow than we already did. So let's go into everything he pretty much went over. He talked about Emmett Till, how Emmett Till, that black people, we could be lynched without consequences back then. The truth of the matter is that Emmett Till could be just as much lynched today without consequences by other black people than he could back then. Again, that we're black people, the only group of people that we know of, other than the Italian mafia, that has a no snitch rule. That says that snitches being stitches. If you look at all the murders in the United States of America, black folks, I say this all the time, we're 13% of the population responsible for half the murders. And that's usually young black males. So that's even the smaller brother. You're talking about 2% of the population responsible for half the murders. Mostly against other blacks, and blacks are the biggest victims of murder from that small percentage of people. So in America, every year about half the murder cases go unsolved. Again, mostly amongst blacks. So you telling me that there aren't a lot of black people getting lynched today that without consequences? Absolutely. Then he talked about black women being sexually assaulted. I'm not aware of no evidence of black women being sexually assaulted just in droves in the past. But I will give him this, because the way the laws have been written, women can literally get away with murder. Or a woman can hit a man or do something to a man. The man can't do anything about it. If he responds, he gets in trouble. He's a punk for doing something to that woman. He doesn't respond, he's a punk. If a woman called him something, he walks away, he's a punk. So I will give him Senator Hakeem Jefferies that one. Women are basically protected like there's no tomorrow today, but it's not just black women, all women are. But I'm not aware of any statistical data that black women will be just being sexually assaulted in mass back then. Okay, then he talks about systematic lynching. Again, that goes to what I said about Emmett Till. Blacks are being systematically lynched today by other blacks. But he's talking about this, that 3,000 or so blacks. And every time I hear, the number just changes. Always 3,000 or something. But those 3,000 or so blacks who were lynched in 80 years, that's what he's talking about, quote unquote, without consequences. But the thing is as black people, what it took white supremacists 80 years to do to us, we do to ourselves in about 8 to 10 months. And we're worried about, we're worried about those 80 lynchings, but we're not worried about what we're doing to ourselves every year, every 8 to 9 months that we eclipse that. And in some months, in some years, it takes half a year for black folks to kill that many blacks of each other. So how many blacks are being systematically lynched today? Then he talked about children being denied quality education. Again, where's the evidence that children were denied quality education under Jim Crow? And they say this without any knowledge whatsoever of what it actually requires, how much it actually requires to educate children. I would say that, judging based upon what we see in inner city schools today, how can you tell me that children were denied education back then when we're denying ourselves the education today? And by the way, the main reason why the inner city schools are horrible is not because of the lack of funding and not because of anything that the system is doing, because we have a culture of raising badass kids, and we send those badass kids to the school, and those badass kids in true N-word fashion terrorizing the school, making it difficult to teach. That's why the inner city schools are bad, because of the culture of the people we send into the schools, not the schools themselves. But black kids back then didn't have that attitude. Again, we had families that raised children in a good culture. I don't care how much segregation they had, we had families and children were being raised to be decent human beings. So you telling me I need to know exactly how black children were denied quote unquote quality education back then. And you listen to Thomas Sowell when he came up in the city of New York back in the day. The white schools were more funded than the black schools, but black kids were putting out just as great a product as the white schools were. So that doesn't make any sense. Of course, he really truly has no evidence to back that up. They always say things they really have no evidence to back up. Then he talked about, black folks denied the right to vote. Well, black folks denied the right to vote. Maybe you may have something on that. But today, I would be more concerned about the fact that black folks are lacking in voting. All of those black people fought for your right to vote. And black folks aren't voting today. And I agree, like I said, they had methods, there were methods used back then to prevent black people from voting, like poll taxes and grandfather laws and stuff like that. But that wasn't everywhere. And I know blacks get into this mindset of thinking if some incident happened, 100 years ago in some city in Mississippi, all of a sudden it was happening to every black person in America. The fact is that black today have some of the lowest voter turnouts. So are we really better off today than we were? Like I said, I love how black folks, they get into this mindset of being so focused on what happened in the past. Crying about racism of the past, again, using the past to fuel their race anger of the day, they kind of forget about what we're doing today. But I can say one thing that was good about better under Jim Crow, we had intact families, we had low crime rates, much higher marriage rates. At one point in time, the crime rates among black folks and the marriage were lower than that of white folks, and the marriage rates of blacks were higher than that of whites. Okay, so you can't tell me that it was all bad. Again, one thing that we did have back then, as a society as a whole, we had shame and decency, and that's something that we're severely lacking, and it's absolutely lacking in the black community. So so in some ways, many ways, we were better under Jim Crow. But of course, that'll go right over the race hustler's head because they're only looking to be victims. Anyway, as for this Representative Hakeem Jefferies, sounds like he needs to check himself before he's wrecked himself, because he did a great job of wrecking himself by being uneducated and ignorant, as always, for these brats. Again, being in Congress doesn't mean that you're not stupid. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And from what I've heard here, he wrecked himself more than so he needs to take his own advice. And as always, y'all, until next time.